Greetings, dear listener. Welcome to our humble podcast. Here we will lead you to tales of the past, tales of the future, and tales of now. Tales of other realms, from within and without. Yes, indeed. Some tales complete, others a mere glimpse into larger worlds. Tales from the depths of our mind, tales inspired by the world around. Some happy, some sad, and some, well, dear listener, you'll have to make up your own mind. Welcome to Friday's Fantasy. Congress. Back in the day, the United States used to have a word for a group of people meeting to provide a layer of government. It was called Congress, and they owned the word as if there were no other meanings. It means something different now, since they came. There were only 3 of them, crammed into their tin can-looking spaceship. In fact, we used to call it the baked bean tin, and that was funny. Until we got a look inside. BBC writers would have had a field day. Well, field trip, if they could. MC Escher fans would have told you he was onto something. Physicists would have said there was new physics. It would have thrown the standard model out of the window. But we didn't get in for years. So that tin can sat there, 4 crude legs and a ladder, lowered by hand. Well, hand. They don't have hands. What they have is a roiling, constantly moving set of horror tentacles, set from some central body that we can barely see. Vantablack can take a back seat on this one. They seem to move by rolling, and they have no particular orientation when they are as still as they can get. Not rolling around the landscape, they just sit there, just twisting and moving endlessly. We think they've got some sort of vision comparable to ours, but hearing is beyond them, not in our range anyhow. Wherever they're from, our frequency range doesn't matter to them. Took us 7 months to discover they talk to each other via radio, somewhere around the 86 MHz range, FM. Yes, that's just below what we're ending analogue broadcasts on. So naturally no one was looking for that. So for 7 months we talked by text. They're highly intelligent, obviously. They're from beyond the confines of our solar system. Of course they're intelligent. So they did an analysis of our broadcast languages. Turns out we've broadcast a lot more than we think, by talking some obscure languages they picked up in World War II. The expanding sphere of radiation that we admit should have just about precluded picking up those signals, but they got a clue and followed the trail of signals, because they could, at greater than light speed. Their ship was talking to them the whole time via radio. Of course it was, because they're intelligent and they have some sort of AI to run the ship, because, as it turns out, they can't pilot it on their own. And one would think that if we're talking by text, we'd be talking in a common language. No. Because we didn't transmit much text and they wouldn't have understood it anyhow, because you need dialogue for true understanding, otherwise one might mistake a few scratches in a rock for representation of a whole language. No, they translated what they heard into text of their own making, which we spent a further 5 months trying to interpret. It was fruitless for 5 long months. Then someone suggested that they were talking something obscure. Navajo. Heard Navajo. Rendered as an alien text on a whiteboard in the middle of a field in Somerset. The army got bored and went away. The groupies went away. Just a bunch of scientists and linguists. There's scientists too, but point is, specialists, left in a field in which the farmer had to come and mow because the damn grass was getting in the way. They mowed their bit by spinning around and sharpening their appendages, and raked it. So, anyway, Navajo. All the talk was of war and strategic decisions, if we could have understood it, and when we did, we all got a bit nervous until I jumbled up the words to make the point. So this subset of an obscure language hardly anyone spoke anymore, speaking only about war, that was our communication medium. Month 7. Some hand radio clown came and sat in the field. The aliens had just about made it known they didn't like people being excluded by the expedient of gently dismantling every exclusionary barrier, including the gate to the field, and we got used to the sheep roaming in and out, and people coming and going out of curiosity. Mostly people found it so boring that they left. Only the linguistic enthusiasts stayed. Most everyone said it was like watching a PowerPoint presentation most of the time. And to be fair, it was. We found out they weren't keen on the US because they just took everything out of their field and placed it in the next field instead. Didn't seem to matter what size it was, they just picked it up and moved it, squishily rolling under it until their objective was achieved. They understood commerce and demonstrated this by terrifying the farmer. He wasn't a stupid man by any means, but they turned up on his doorstep, more or less dragged him to the field, and paid him rent by pointing to their mess and handing him a ruby the size of a large man's clenched fist. We'd got the idea they were peaceful at this time, and we couldn't stop them anyhow, so we just observed. It was more data. Every day a phalanx of reporters showed up, and every day they went away again, because no one could understand anything. The farmer got counselling for his instant celebrity and wealth. This clown with the ham radio. He came along and sat down in the back of his car and started fidgeting about. And 3 days into his little camping trip, he made a broadcast. We didn't connect the dots at first, but we did see the aliens all startled by sticking out every tentacle on their round bodies and bouncing high up into the air, coming down and sticking into the ground. Greg worked it out, because he switched his equipment off and came running over while the 3 retired to their tin can. He explained what he'd done, so we were simultaneously mad as balls and euphoric. The 3 didn't bother trying to write things, they just went and got the radio and pointed at it, and got between it and Greg. They did not like the broadcast at all. Turns out that all we had to do was broadcast at very small amount of power in Navajo, and we could talk to them. The chaps the Americans sent were very impressed. They were all old, of course. No one, not even a grandchild of the participants of World War II, were alive, so the language had been preserved by enthusiasts from the old tribes. The very small amount of power thing was important. One of them was deaf from then on. The other 2 spent a lot of time trying to make sure that it was stimulated, but the roiling movement stopped, and a lot of the time it would sit there like a blob, doing nothing. The occasional writing explained that it was unable to hear and life wasn't worth living. We depressed an alien by deafening it. Greg wasn't allowed near the radio at all. The other 2 weren't quite as bright after that either. We found out that they operate in 3s, and only 3s, bonded for life, essentially the same creature, broadcasting constantly as their Congress, as they called it, operated to provide specialist functions of their intelligence. They couldn't be more than a few light seconds apart because it was painful to communicate, and being out of contact was not to be thought of. While not a single creature, they naturally bonded after birth with some others on the same frequency. One of the results of this was the discovery that we're not, as a species, as a planet, compatible with them. We use all the frequencies they do to make a cacophony that would deafen every one of them. Even if we had landed on their planet, we'd have probably wiped out the entire species. They don't know how their ship operates, so they don't have the right frequency, so they can't talk to others of their kind to find out. Sections of their society are stratified by who can hear whom. some variations ensure that not everyone is isolated. So if they had just tuned up to 87 megahertz, they'd have all been deaf the minute they landed and exited the ship. They didn't expect us to be doing what we do. As for what they want, it's just pure curiosity. The ship picked up a transmission and came to see who was transmitting. We're rather reckless, it seems. They can't stay. They're the only ones who could stay, but they have to warn their people that other people use radio waves to muck about with. The fastest thing in space is a pony, so they have to pony up, like the Old West before telegraph. The ship was only about 3 feet high, so they invited a drone in to get a look, because we can't fit in the door. That's when we truly learned about their strange inner space. We can't understand it right now, but it's new physics. They get about by having a full awareness of their surroundings, usually, but one of them wasn't talking, so they told us they'd have to stay in basically a broom cupboard the whole trip back. We apologised. They said that no apology was necessary. Things were bound to go wrong when dealing with aliens. We said that we were grateful for their understanding. They said they were diplomats. They barely understood anything, except that things could go wrong. At least that's what we think they said. They left us gifts. A huge star map listing species who are spacefaring and those who are not. A complaint form to the Galactic Council, as a non-starfaring species were allowed to complain about being interfered with. A boxed set of their longest-running soap opera. They say that it's probably the best way of understanding them. We gave them the scripts to Star Wars and Star Trek. They wouldn't take anything electronic. They took some stuffed animals from the gift shop, including some unflattering representations of themselves. We discovered at this point that they had a sense of humour. The little tin can lifted off, silently and without fuss, for perhaps 1,000 feet. And then a long stream of flame came out of it so very fiercely that we thought it had blown up, and then they were gone. So, aliens came, and we learned that the universe is full of life, but we can only see into the distant past, so we don't see it. The first ones to visit can't live with us at all, but one day we'll be able to talk to them again. Hawking was right. We should stop broadcasting, because not only are we deafening people, but not all species out there are benign. Some aliens like peanut butter. They call themselves the Congress, and the name fits. We did some damage, and I think we got lucky. The music for this episode was by Jazar from betterwithmusic.com, released under Creative Commons Share-alike license. The story was by Friday Jones, read by me, Friday. Critical feedback and support was provided by Hayley Hattle. This has been a podcast of Friday's Fantasies, Stories by Friday, and forthcoming, a serial. Find the podcast wherever you listen to yours.